Welcome to the summit. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Alexis Moore. I'm your co-host, and I'm here today with Dr. Ron D. Siegel. Dr. Ronald D. Siegel is an assistant professor of psychology part-time at Harvard Medical School, where he has taught for over 35 years. He is a longtime student of mindfulness meditation and serves on the board of directors and faculty of the Institute for Meditation and Psychotherapy. Dr. Siegel is the author of many books, including The Mindfulness Solution, Everyday Practices for Everyday Problems, and his most recent book, The Extraordinary Gift of Being Ordinary, Finding Happiness Right Where You Are. He is also professor for the Science of Mindfulness, a research-based path to well-being produced by the Great Courses. He teaches internationally about the integration of mindfulness practices into psychotherapy and other fields. So welcome, Dr. Siegel. It's so wonderful to be here with you today.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Thank you. And today's theme is relationships and communication, creating deeper, more meaningful connections. So let's dive into that today. Just to get started, your recent book, The Extraordinary Gift of Being Ordinary, Finding Happiness Right Where You Are, explores the importance of making a connection instead of an impression. So can you share with us what that means?
Yeah, especially in the modern world, many of us spend time either feeling down in the dumps, feeling in some way that we're not good enough, not living up to expectations, not doing as well as other people in some area or another, or we're feeling pretty good, but we're stressed out trying to stay on top of our game. And all of this concern with how we're doing and self-evaluation tends to get in the way of connecting with other people. And we get pretty addicted to looking for something to support our self-esteem. In fact, if you look at the world's advertising, you look at so many people's achievement goals, it's all to try to eke out feeling okay about myself for a little while. And the problem with that is very often it gets in the way of connecting to other people. We're predominantly social critters, right? We evolved to be in groups, in families, in intimate connections. And when we're worried about how we're doing and how people are seeing us, we don't tend to be really honest with one another. A lot of us go through life feeling inadequate in part because if we were nation states, it would be as though we were looking at our own crime and poverty statistics while looking at other people's travel brochures, right? People go through the world trying to look good, trying to put on a good face. And especially now in the world of social media where, people don't post on Instagram or TikTok something like, woke up this morning, had the runs again, think I'm going to get a bad performance review at work, and my partner is going to leave me. It's like, here I am doing fantastic things, looking beautiful in fantastic places with fantastic people. And all of this really gets in the way of intimacy. It gets in the way of honest connection. And we can feel it when we feel the opposite of that. If we ever are with a good friend, where we're really talking honestly about our experience, which always includes some pain, right? Life is filled with ups and downs. We win and lose all the time. When we're with another person being really honest like that, our whole sense of separate self starts to shift. And we start to shift from feeling like an isolated me trying to prove myself toward a connected we, part of this thing called a friendship or a family relationship or a parent-child relationship or a lover relationship. It works in all the different forms of contact and connection we might have. So one way in our modern kind of crazy society that we can try to improve and enhance our relationships is to really start to look at our addiction to trying to feel good about ourselves and see whether there are other pathways to well-being. And frankly, the most powerful other pathway to well-being is learning how to safely, honestly, and vulnerably connect with other people.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for that. Thanks for that breakdown. And as you're speaking, it just made me think about how, okay, well, why would we be so focused on trying to look good. Wouldn't that be to try to get other people's approval, or to, I don't know, try to almost like try to connect with more people, like seek some sort of safety and like inclusion in the group? So it just seems kind of ironic that it's like we're so focused on this like self evaluation to try to achieve that end. But then it sounds like from what you're saying in the process, maybe we're actually holding ourselves apart from that.
Yeah, no, and it's a really good observation that you're making, which is that indeed, a lot of times we feel we need to achieve in order to feel lovable, right? That, I'm a clinical psychologist, so, I work with people for decades. And, so often you'll hear somebody say, well, I'm never going to find a partner because I'm not special enough. How am I going to sell this car compared to all the other cars? And it's so sad because it's based on this illusion that what really makes people love us is how we look in some way, whether we're part of the in group, whether we're sexy or attractive, whether we're successful and have money, or even frankly somewhat higher order values get sucked into this. Am I proving that I'm a generous enough person? Did I look like a kind person here? Did I look like I'm not self-involved? I need to look not self-involved so that people will like me. It can even be pretty noble qualities that we get hooked on, basically seeking love. And there's other components to it also, because when we look at just social mammals generally, there are even crickets that do this. We have a way of organizing ourselves into hierarchies, dominance hierarchies. Who's on top? Who's either the most popular or the strongest or whatnot? And it turns out that historically, we go way back to living all together, our ancestors on the African savanna. Those that were dominant did get to reproduce more, pass on their genes more, take care of their kids more. So there are these kind of evolutionarily determined instincts and tendencies that also add into it and make it worse, that make it so that we feel at a very gut level, gee, I can't be at the bottom of the pack. I can't be less than others on whatever dimension is important to us. But I do think that what you said is vitally important, that so often our secret wish is, if I achieve in these ways, then they'll love me. And, kids grow up with this, right? There, so many times where kids feel like their love from their parents is contingent on getting a good grade in school, behaving well at the dinner table, looking good, all of these variables. So it's easy to see how we fall into the trap. What's a little bit harder is falling out of the trap.
Right, falling out of the trap. And I was listening to one of your talks, and I heard you mention this term that really stuck out to me, which is like the self-esteem project. So, yeah, could you tell us a little bit about that term, and then maybe you touched on getting out of it. So maybe then we'll go into a little bit of that.
Okay, well, let's start. Let me start by saying a little bit more about what this looks like.
Okay.
And here's a place where mindfulness practices I've been involved in for some decades now can play a useful role. Mm-hmm. Just watching our hearts and mind during the day can be very informative. Speaking personally, I open my email, and if I get invited to speak at a conference with well-known people, suddenly I'm sitting tall in my seat and I'm feeling like I'm a successful psychologist. All these years of everything from meditation practice to psychotherapy and writing and teaching, I've really become a wonderful, special, valuable human being, right? And then the next email is like, my friends were invited to do it and I wasn't. And, suddenly it's like, oh God, I'm totally a has-been. I've gotten old. Nobody's interested in me anymore. I'm exaggerating just a little, right? But these kinds of ups and downs happen constantly throughout the day if we're attuned to it. If we think, oh well, this is important to watch. And we start to learn all sorts of things simply by studying it. For one thing, we learn what's our particular poison. For one person, it's being intelligent is what's important to feel good about oneself. For somebody else, it's being physically attractive. For someone else, it's being physically fit. For another person, it could be, feeling like I'm generous or nice or kind. For virtually all of us who've ever been parents, it's feeling like a good parent. For virtually any of us who've ever been kids, it's feeling like a good kid. There are so many dimensions on which we're constantly judging ourselves, and it can become useful to notice. So, what are the ones I'm most hooked on? What are the ones that they usually started pretty early in life? Like for me, words came easily to me, and my parents were both teachers, and if I sounded smart, that was they liked that, right? And I picked up on that from a very early age. So I doubled down on it, right? And tried to do well in school and all of that. But for everybody, it's something else, right? That does it for us. Just starting to notice, okay, what did I get hooked on in order to feel good about myself? And how do I currently, look for signs of success? Because the looking for to enhance our self-esteem becomes very much an addiction. It feels so good. It feels so good when we feel either, somebody likes us or thinks highly of us, or even we just think highly of ourselves. Sometimes the comparisons aren't with actual people in our lives currently, but they're with inner images of how I'm supposed to be. Yeah, I'm being the kind of person I want to be. And we feel good about ourselves, and it feels so bad to feel like we failed, like we haven't met our expectations, that others are better than us. And any situation in life in which there's a big contrast between something that makes us feel good and something that makes us feel bad is a setup for addictions.
Wow.
I don't have a lot of experience with cocaine, but my understanding is feels pretty good for a while, but when it wears off, feels pretty bad. What's the solution? We're intelligent people, more cocaine, right? And that's what we do with the self-esteem stuff. And I mean, that's why so many people are so stressed out, trying to continue to prove themselves. So the project begins really with catching ourselves in the act and just starting to see how this plays out. A second part, which is, I think, really important, is noticing how unwinnable this game is.
Mm.
Um, we just can't stay feeling good about ourselves consistently for too long, and that's for two reasons. If I can lay it out, one of them is something that we could call narcissistic or self-esteem recalibration. The things that used to float my boat no longer float my boat. There was a time as a kid, I can remember this, putting together those sort of multicolored rings that have a hole in the middle, and you put them on a pole, and if you get it right, it looks like a cone or a Christmas tree. Yay, I did it. And there may be a time, in the skilled nursing facility where once again I'm proud of that, but at the moment it's not floating my boat, right? At the moment it's like, yeah, same for, riding a bicycle, going to school, having your first girlfriend or boyfriend, learning how to drive a car, perhaps owning a car, perhaps getting your first apartment. The list is very long. I often do trainings for psychotherapists, and there'll be a room full of psychotherapists, and I'll talk about how all of us work pretty hard to get our terminal degrees. It's a lot of years of practice, and to get licensed, you have to do sort of live clinical work after that. And when we finally arrive, feel pretty good. And I ask people to remember how they felt when they finally got licensed as a mental health professional, and they're all feeling good. And then I say, how many of you woke up this morning feeling good about yourself because you're a licensed mental health professional? And they all start laughing, right? Are you in the business? Like, I hear you laughing. And sometimes there's one newly minted therapist will raise their hand and they say, why is everybody laughing? But the problem is we habituate to everything. So we keep needing more and more. This is why we see, billionaires competing. It's like, this really doesn't have an end. And the other really big problem is what goes up comes down. So let's say we're so good at what we do. We're an Olympic athlete and we actually won the gold medal at the Olympics. What are the chances of doing it in 4 years, in 8, in 12? life changes, right? We age, we lose faculties. Other people come up with better ideas. Other people, do things better than we had done it. Nothing lasts this way. So between these two, between the fact that we habituate and we recalibrate and the fact that everything changes, we're doomed. This is simply not going to work as a reliable path to well-being. And that's what turns us toward other things. And central to our theme of the summit today, the other theme is, can we instead find ways to meaningfully connect with other people? Because when we're connected that way, we finally relax. The whole project starts to seem less important, both because we've got the love, so we're not seeking it, along the lines of what you were saying before, and because we don't even feel so separate. The whole narrative about me and who I am and how I'm doing is just less alive for us when we feel connected to other people. Sorry, I've given you a lot there, I know.
No, I was laughing because, your examples were so great. And I appreciate you providing, the personal example too of like, oh, my email inbox and like, oh, great. Yeah, because it's just so relatable. I mean, even I think you demonstrated it, right? Like I can feel the connection within you sharing that because it's like, oh yeah, I mean, of course I have my own experience of that. And then it's like, I think if we go the self-esteem direction, then it's like, oh, I'm talking to Dr. Ron Siegel and he's a Harvard professor. And it's like, oh yeah, we're humans.
Yeah.
Right. And so then that feels like so much better because everything is so much softer. And I loved that you gave such a thorough explanation because you started out, this is like an unwinnable game. And then it was really, it's like, oh yeah, okay, cool. I've tried that. Maybe if I just do more, it's going to get better, right? That's kind of like maybe
that is the fantasy. And
it's going to stop being painful if I just keep going.
I'll say one of the advantages of being old is having seen it not work for so long. I actually got into the project and writing the book. I was already in my 60s, and I'd written a bunch of books. I've been a psychologist. I've gotten to teach in all these different places. I've been involved in Buddhist meditation practice for decades, which has as a goal, letting go of self-preoccupation. I've been a psychologist. You would think that I would have established something like a secure, stable, coherent sense of self. Nope. It was still going up and down with every email. I have a good friend who's similar to me, who's been involved in meditation practices for years. His name is Paul Fulton, really brilliant psychologist. And he said once a few years ago, said, yeah, my appraisal of myself as a psychologist is about as good as the last session. If I felt connected, like the person was growing, it was interesting and engaged, and they were connected with their heart. I feel like all these years, I'm a well-oiled machine. Look at this, all this experience and stuff has really paid off. If it was disconnected, seemed stuck, et cetera, it's like, gee, I was a bright guy. I could have gone into so many different professions. This is clearly not my calling. So it's and it is very helpful, as you're saying, to talk about it, because when we see that we're not alone in this,
right?
There's such a mythology that only losers suffer from this. Right. Oh. If any of us were really successful, we wouldn't be having any of these feelings. But I think when you see the two billionaires competing over how high each rocket goes, I suspect that that's not actually the case.
Right. It's like, okay, just got done with the session, felt disconnected, wasn't really flowing, and okay, then I should have said this, done that, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, forget about all those other, folks who have expressed like how helpful that it was and da 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 da. Like all that goes out the window.
Totally,
it's totally. Like, it's just this one thing. So, this is like a really fun kind of, really fun, just like back and forth about how this doesn't work. So let's get into, this other focus of like shifting towards genuine connection and belonging, just a small topic, but maybe what's like an entry point for us into this?
Well, I think one entry point is just to reflect what are the moments in our own lives when we're really not on the self-esteem roller coaster because we're really connected with another person. Just to start thinking, to start noticing those. Because most of us, even those of us who have been particularly tormented by this, most of us have had moments. Perhaps one of the reasons why this is going to sound like name dropping. It's a part of our whole theme, but I have had the opportunity to meet the Dalai Lama on a couple of occasions, right? And he really is this special guy in the sense, I'll tell you a story. So we had a conference at Harvard Medical School where he was presenting, and one of the wonderful things when you organize a conference with the Dalai Lama is you can invite anybody who you can think of and they'll come, right? Because they want the opportunity to be with him. And John Kabat-Zinn, who's done a lot to introduce mindfulness practices into medicine, was there as a participant. And I remember we were at some social part of the conference, and he said, one of the wonderful things about talking with the Dalai Lama is you just don't feel like he's scanning the room looking for a better networking opportunity. Which is hilarious and true. Right. It's really true. He's really there. And for those couple of minutes, he's really interested in you. One of the reasons why, and, he happens to be famous for being, compassionate, and he's the leader of a large school of Buddhism and all that. But it's that capacity to be present with another person. And when we're with someone like that, we immediately feel different. We feel like it's safe. I don't have to prove myself. I can tell the truth here, and we feel loved. And not a personal love like I love you because you're great or I'm attracted to you physically, but love just for who you are as another human being, and that human beings are essentially lovable. So starting to just reflect, what are those moments? When have we been with someone where they made us feel that way? Or sometimes it's just being with a friend who's just being honest, and we don't have to fake it anymore. Sometimes it's being with a child, who's crying, and we're holding that child, or an elderly person or an ill person where we're supporting them, where it's really just about connection and realizing that, okay, it's possible. And then to start seeing, okay, so what are the factors that made it possible? And it's almost always because we really turned our attention toward the other person rather than focusing on what does it mean about me.
Oh my gosh.
And that in the moment, to the extent to which it was appropriate in the relationship, we risked being honest. We risked telling the truth about our experience as a human being. One of the reasons I love talking to audiences and doing workshops about this topic is when we're in a room and people are saying, oh yeah, me too, actually, just hearing that, what a relief, oh, so we can talk, we can be together, we can hold hands if that's what's appropriate. So the pathway out starts with just noticing that we probably already have it in our life to some degree, and noticing, so what are the factors that make it possible for us? Another important pathway out really involves the title of the book, The Extraordinary Gift of Being Ordinary. Can we start embracing our ordinariness? A friend and colleague of mine, Terry Real, he teaches a lot about couples therapy, and he works a lot with very successful narcissistic men, and they're often in couples relationships that are disasters, and not surprisingly, and he suggests a very simple technique. Whenever you find yourself starting to rise up as though thinking you're better than other people in some way, like tug on the balloon string, actually say, all right, let me come back to embracing my ordinariness. And similarly, when you find yourself sinking and feeling like not good enough, tug it up, because nobody's more worthy than anybody else. yeah, we all have different talents, right? If
Mhm.
I were to draw a picture, you'd say that looks like a third grader did it because that's when I stopped drawing pictures, and that's where it's at. And some people are Olympic athletes, some people are brilliant artists. It's not that we don't have differences and that it's not important to recognize them. I rather my brain surgeon have experience with brain surgery. Just saying. Um, but but the feeling better than or worse than somebody, that's always crazy. And that's something where we can notice it and affirmatively kind of try to tug in one direction or another. I'll just throw in one more. There's a whole list of them. So the book, if people are interested, is really a manual for things we could try, because one approach or
Yeah.
another is going to be more or less effective and helpful for one person or another. But one of the ones that I find really interesting is to take whatever the particular criteria or attribute it is that we're hooked on. Let's say it's intelligence,
Yeah.
and ask the question, so when and where did I learn that being intelligent is important?
Hmm.
Like, where did that come from? And it can become very interesting to inquire. It's usually either parents or teachers or peer group, and then where did they get the idea?
Yeah.
To really start, questioning
Right.
this entire enterprise. And another one, this actually comes from the cognitive therapist Albert Ellis, who is a bit of a madman. Developed something called rational emotive therapy. He likes to ask this question: how does the report card work? To think of yourself as intelligent, is it, was I intelligent in the last 10 minutes? Was I intelligent today, the last week, the last month, the last decade?
Uh-huh.
Like how, what's the grading period, right? Is a cumulative grade point average since we were born, or is it just recently? Because it turns out that without thinking about it, most of us have evolved some kind of system. Yeah, yeah. Well, if I haven't proved myself in the last week, then I got to do something, right? I've sunk back to ordinariness again, and I have to prove it. Sometimes it's if I haven't proven it in the last minute in a party, yeah, I've got to do it. It's
Right.
very interesting to start examining that, and all these things are designed to give us perspective, to free us up a little, and to encourage us to safely connect with other people.
I heard this from someone. This, I don't know, gosh, this, I don't know, must have been even almost a year ago, but it's really stayed with me. Um, and they just said, if I am in a space and I'm trying to look good, like I'm already losing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, that has really stayed with me, because it's just something that it's like, I don't know, it's kind of like a easy way to check in. Like,
Yeah.
what am I doing right now so that I can try to look good? And then you can almost feel it. It's like a little bit of like a shield,
Mm-hmm.
in some ways. And coming out of that, usually it's like, well, I mean, one antidote has just been like, okay, like what can I actually like give? Maybe I could go and like say hi to someone or something. I don't know.
Yeah, totally.
Like help out in some way.
And you know what else is useful is seeing when we're starting to feel that sinking feeling, to
Mm.
ask ourselves what it reminds us of. I'll give you another perfect example from a personal example from being, but it's also a good example from being, on the speaking circuit, training mental health professionals. I was at a conference, and as is often the case, there was a social hour for the presenters, and I was at the social hour, and looking around the room, there were several people that, in my appraisal, I thought of as being on the A team, while I saw myself as being on the B team. Okay, we're all on the circuit, but they're
Sure.
really well known, right? Um,
Right.
and it seemed to me in the first few minutes that some of them were more interested in talking with one another than they were in talking with me. And I had this kind of sinking feeling and this thought, do I really want to be here and all that? And I took a moment to reflect, like, okay, what, this feeling is familiar. What's this about? And I flashed to being a little kid. I had an older brother who, as older brothers go, was pretty good to me. And there were some sadistic moments, but generally it was pretty good to me. And he would often let me tag along with him and his friends. But when I was tagging along with him and his friends, I knew that it was a bit of an act of charity, and I wasn't really part of the group. I was allowed to come along, and there was this, I still wanted to do it, but this feeling of inadequacy, being the little kid, not being in the know, not being as strong, not being as capable, and all that. And it took a moment. I realized it's that feeling. It's that old feeling, and just noticing that the current sort of self-esteem collapse was a rekindling of, I don't want to call it a trauma because it's such a tiny T trauma, but still, for a little kid, the tiny T trauma, a rekindling of that old feeling. And that was enough. Just seeing the connection was enough to decide, let me just take 2 steps closer, listen, and participate. And I did. And it turned out that they were lovely, and very soon it became a we, and we had an interesting conversation, and I felt glad to have stayed. So we can also do that. It's about using. It's about really using each opportunity where we have a bit of a collapse as a learning opportunity. Like, what can I learn from this? How can I explore inside? What can I understand about my vulnerabilities here? Because very often when we connect to the earlier injuries, we realize, well, I'm not a little kid anymore. Maybe it is okay. Let me risk it. And that's another avenue, I think, that can be very helpful for freeing us.
Yeah, and it's so funny because it's like, if you would have gone to the kind of deep level of vulnerability of like talking to someone else in the room and being like, man, I feel kind of awkward, or like, I feel like I'm kind of, there's some people who are a little above me here in some ways, or whatever the language would be. It's like guaranteed the other person would be like, oh my gosh, me too.
Yeah. Right.
Just about guaranteed. There's for sure multiple people. Probably the people who are in the circle talking right then are like, oh gosh, man, their research is like, oh, so deep, and like, when was the last time I published? But I love that, because I love that example, because like I think that most of us can place ourselves in the position of feeling that sinking feeling. Okay, people don't want to talk to me. And then I should just leave, and then like actually leaving,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, sure.
Into the hotel room and just like laying on the bed and like staring at the ceiling. And, like,
right.
And then like and instead, I love that example, because it's like, okay, I can just like go and listen. Oh, and then by the way, in that circumstance, I'm never like looking around and being like, oh, are there other people standing alone that I could go talk to?
Right.
Well,
that's the other thing, and I want to come back to that. Thank you for bringing it up again, because you mentioned it before. What if I tried to shift my focus to, what if it's not about me, right? And what if I try to think, well, what feels good to me? Well, what feels good to me is to be in loving connection. Let me try being loving, and I'm using that word. I mean it in the not erotic, warm sense. Because the word love, and we shy away from it in the mental health field because of all the erotic overtones and stuff. But I what if I just tried being kind to someone else? And it's so interesting. Those of us who are in the psychotherapy biz, as well as people who are parents or taking care of their parents, or there's a lot of us in the world whose roles involve service a lot. Maybe not our professional role, maybe our professional role. But just considering, all right, I'm starting to sink. Let me try just being of service. And, it may not stop me from sinking, but at least at least somebody else will be happy, and usually the kind of connection that comes from caring for another also shifts us out of this perspective, because it's not about me. It's about how might I be useful here? And I don't want to lay this on folks. I'm saying this as a guy, and I know gender's not always binary and things, but people who tend to identify with feminine attributes sometimes feel compelled to take care of the other, right? Like, oh, I only have to take care of the other. I can't consider my own needs. So I'm not arguing for that, but I'm arguing for if we can freely choose to just be nice, try it as an experiment and see if it yields a connection, because very often it does.
Right. Just like this idea of being ordinary. So maybe we can dive into that a little bit more. Like if you were in that situation at the conference and, you shifted into this idea of being ordinary, maybe what would that look like?
Yeah, it helps a lot because it would be like, hey, this cheese is pretty good with the crackers.
Oh my God.
You want to try it?
Yeah.
It starts to become very simple things. And, this is where mindfulness practice helps. It can help us to appreciate very simple things and savor them a little bit and bring the attention back to the present and step out of the thought stream a little bit and just be this kind of really quite ordinary mammal hanging out with these other mammals having cheese and crackers without anybody having to be better than or less than anyone else. And also helps to reflect on existential reality. I'm more acutely aware of this at my age than somebody might be who's younger, unless they've had difficult life experiences. But, it becomes clear that this is a time-limited trip. And, the bumper sticker, whoever has the most toys when they win, when they die wins, the idea that nobody's going to take anything with them, no matter how popular, successful, buff, cool, whatever we were during our life, 100 years from now, not going to matter a lot. And I don't mean to be a downer here, but it can give perspective. And wouldn't it be nice to not have to wait until we have the terminal illness to really get it about what matters and what doesn't matter and begin to shift our attention? Because so many of these things that give us it's really a dopamine surge. They wire people up and they put them in simulated social media conditions. And every time somebody gets a like, there's a squirt of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens, the part of the brain that lights up with cocaine, that lights up with gambling wins, that lights up with sex. It's like, yay, I'm great because I got another like. And wouldn't it be nice to not have to wait for the terminal illness to get at that? This may be misguided and unnecessary.
That would be ideal. that would be ideal. It would be lovely. Yeah. And so I guess, and I'm aware of our time. So, we're kind of coming up into our last few minutes. And at the same time, I don't want to bring up like another huge topic because we're in our last couple of minutes, but I do want to touch a little bit maybe on like family relationships. And, many of us may have relationships with their family that feels disconnected.
So often, one of the things that makes us all get so hooked on this various forms of self-esteem boosts is that there's so much messaging from the culture, right? That if you were successful, you'd be happy. And let's say our child comes home and they really wanted to make the baseball team in the spring, and it was competitive and they didn't make it. And they're downtrodden and depressed. And we're thinking, like many parents do think, and like psychologists got them to think, I'm ashamed of my profession in this, I need to maintain my child's self-esteem. Mm-hmm. So what I do in the conversations, I say, oh, well, I understand that's disappointing, but you were great on the basketball team in the fall, and and your school's team went to the regional championships. And, in January, remember the mathletes? You were like fourth in the school. You're smart, you're a great athlete. I know this didn't work out, but you're going to succeed the next time. Trying to do something to this is the snorting the cocaine approach, right? You've sunk. Let me get a hit of something that's going to raise make them feel good again. The alternative is to start trying to train our kids in self-compassion, because this is another much more reliable pathway to well-being. That would sound something like this. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry you didn't make the team. I know you were practicing. I know it meant a lot to you. I know how painful that could be. When I was about your age, I was really into drama, and I really wanted to be in the school play. And I thought I would be actually perfect for the lead. And I tried out, and the teacher who was the drama coach, I don't know why, didn't pick me. And in fact, I was only sort of an extra, in the play. And I was so, I was really upset. And I remember for, a couple of weeks, I kind of moped around in school, and it was really painful to go to the rehearsals and see the other kids who were the stars and I wasn't. All of us have our ups and downs. We win sometimes, we lose sometimes. It's really hard being a human being this way, because it hurts a lot when we lose, and it feels so good when we win. But we're all in this together. It happens to all of us. Can I give you a hug, sweetheart?
Mm.
Starting to help our kids learn how to internalize the sense of, it's okay, sweetheart, not because you're special, not because you're better than others. None of that, just because we're all in this together as human beings, and we all go up and down. So the same way that, we were feeling a bit of a connection, talking about this and the universality of this, help kids to start to feel it at an early age, and help them to not get quite as addicted to the self-esteem roller coaster. I think it's a tremendous gift that we can offer.
Is there anything that you feel like you like to leave folks with?
Just that we're all in this together, and the more we can structure our lives and our relationships so that we feel it, the better off we'll all be. Because not only do we get happier when we relax our preoccupation with this sort of self-esteem roller coaster, but we make the people around us happier. It's contagious, and it's a gift to the world to embrace our ordinariness in this way. And it just feels better. It just feels a lot better.
Yeah. Yes. That is my experience. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Siegel. I mean, I would love to be able to chat with you for much longer than this, because, gosh, there's just so much in this beautiful topic, and so many great stories that I wish I could share with you, kind of relating to some of the things that you said, but perhaps another time.
I would look forward to it. It's wonderful speaking with you.
Oh, thank you.
If people want to learn more about it, my website's just drronsiegel.com, and you can look at The Extraordinary Gift of Being Ordinary. There's a bunch of meditations that come from the book, and exercises that are available for free there. You can check those out if you might like to.
Thank you, everyone. Make sure that you check out Dr. Siegel's website. What is that one more time?
drronsiegel.com. Maybe you can post it in notes or something when this goes out.
Absolutely. And make sure that you also check out the book, The Extraordinary Gift of Being Ordinary. And thank you so much, Dr. Siegel. It's such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much.